Good day, everyone. We were given the task to research unassigned Philippine national issues or problems. Today, we will be talking about the national issue of lack of education. By the end of the report, the national issue on lack of education will be defined in the context of the Philippines, associated with its key causes and effects, and enumerated in the later part of this report will be the steps that the government, national or international organizations, and individuals are doing to alleviate the negative effects of lack of education. Education is vital in the growth and development of a country, as education is a key tool for a huge range of global developments, and one that many of us would assume is getting easier to access for more and more people worldwide. However, statistics are still at an all-time high for those who are victims to receiving poor, or even worse, no education at all. A lack of education can be defined as a state where people have a below-average level of common knowledge about basic things that they would urgently need in their daily life. For instance, this could include basic knowledge in math, writing, spelling, and of the likes. Most countries identify education for all as an important factor for a country to progress. But many countries are still far from being able to provide education for all. The Philippines is one of these countries. Philippine education is strongly viewed as a pillar of national development and a primary avenue for social and economic mobility. It has undergone several stages of development from the pre-Spanish time to the present. Education occupies a central place in political, economical, social, and cultural life in the Philippines. However, the results of the new Multidimensional Poverty Index, or the MPI, created by the Philippine Statistics Authority, which provides information in which dimension the Filipinos are most deprived in, showed that among the four dimensions, which are namely education dimension, housing, water and sanitation dimension, health and nutrition dimension, and employment dimension, Filipinos were found to be most deprived in gaining access to education. In terms of dimension, education had the largest contribution to the MPI, standing at 35.5% in 2016 and 36.9% in 2017. Despite being a middle-income country with sufficient resources to support children's education, many Filipino children miss out on opportunities to learn. The number of children accessing education, the quality of education they receive, and the condition of their learning environment are causes for concern.
Since lack of education was already defined, we have to ask ourselves, what are its main causes? Well, to begin, there are not enough schools. The Philippines cannot anticipate a positive result from its school system with school shortages. It costs money to provide schooling materials together with hiring and training educators. Secondly, the value of education is low. Children belonging to the indigenous population are more often trained to find food and livelihoods for themselves in rural parts of the Philippines than to concentrate on education. As a result, the value and significance of education is never taught to them. Thirdly, the geographical location is not ideal for schooling. This involves things such as severe weather conditions, difficult terrain, and lack of transport. Kids here in the Philippines, for instance, have to walk miles before they can reach the closest primary school. Fourthly, poverty and child labor. In 2013, 19.2% of children said their primary reason for absence from school was insufficient family income. As a result, most of these children work to support their families financially, making child labor a significant contributor to the high number of out-of-school children. And lastly, minority groups are often excluded or forgotten. While their children are stripped of educational opportunities, specific communities, like the Kulumads, find themselves marginalized. This occur either due to the government's passive underfunding in specific geographies where ethnic minorities are concentrated or due to the active discrimination.
Here are some of the effects of lack of education to the nation and the Filipino people. Unemployment. If you apply for a job, chances are that your education level will be screened by companies. If you do not have a sufficient high level of education, you will likely not get the job. Although the employment rate in the Philippines stood down at 5.1% in 2019 from 5.3% in 2018, the figure is still high. Poverty. Basic needs are not met. There are at least 13.7 million Filipino children who are undernourished. It is difficult to properly go to school and receive education when you are not properly fed. Drugs. Due to unemployment, people with low levels of education may be at greater risk to consume drugs, since they simply see no bright future for themselves, and also sell drugs to provide the needs of the family, despite its danger. In 2015, the Philippine Dangerous Drugs Board estimated a total of 1.8 million drug users. Crime. Crime rates in the Philippines are getting high, which is adding to the government's problem. Some of those are robbery, kidnapping, or kidnap for ransom. The National Capital Region had the highest volumes of crime, with a monthly crime rate around 90 per 100,000 people as of 2018, while the most prevalent case is theft. Dependence. Due to lack of education and unemployment, many Filipino families depend on the financial assistance from the government. As of November 2019, 4Ps has a total of 3,993,180 household beneficiaries. These huge numbers stunted the economic growth of the country.
To address shortcomings in the educational system, the Philippine government initiated structural changes in the basic education system through the Kindergarten Education Act in 2011, instructing a mandatory pre-elementary year of kindergarten education, and the Basic Education Act in 2013, extending the elementary and secondary education cycle from 10 to 12 years. The Philippine government also significantly boosted education expenditures. Allocations for the Department of Education were increased by 25%, and higher education budget was increased by almost 45%, making education the largest item on the national budget, standing at 533.31 billion pesos. Internationally, lack of education is being addressed in one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The goal number 4 of the UN SDGs call for quality education that are anchored on 10 targets aiming to achieve inclusive and quality education for all by giving girls and boys complete free primary and secondary schooling, provide equal access to affordable vocational training, to eliminate gender and wealth disparities, and achieve universal access to a quality higher education by 2030. As individuals, we can help address the lack of education through attending school and utilizing the resources they provide to guide us into honing practical skills to be usable in the field we choose. Joining in talks about our educational system can also help as we can assess what is already beneficial and what can be improved. Lastly, initiating actions to help those who have no resources to go to school through donation drives or personally help in mentoring, especially in this pandemic where students need to help each other to effectively venture in online learning.